The acquisition of Alaska by the United States from Russia in 1867, often referred to as Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox after U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward, is a complex historical event that intertwines geopolitics, economics, and the darker undercurrents of colonialism and imperialism. To understand how America came to possess Alaska, why Russia was there in the first place, and the implications of the purchase, we must delve into the historical context, the motivations of both nations, and the often overlooked consequences for indigenous peoples. Now, before we move on with the story, please help a small channel grow. Like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. Okay, back to the story. Russia's presence in Alaska. The colonial frontier. Russia's presence in Alaska began in the mid-18th century, driven by the same imperial ambitions that fueled European colonization elsewhere in the world. The Russian Empire, under the rule of Tsar Peter the Great and his successors, sought to expand its territory and influence across the globe. The exploration of Siberia and the Russian Far East laid the groundwork for further expansion into North America. In 1741, the Danish explorer Vitus Bering, commissioned by Russia, led an expedition that reached the Alaskan coast. This marked the beginning of Russia's interest in the region. By the late 18th century, Russian fur traders, known as promyshlenniki, had established a presence in Alaska, driven by the lucrative fur trade, particularly in sea otter pelts, which were highly valued in China and Europe. The Russian-American Company, RAC, chartered in 1799, became the primary vehicle for Russian colonization in Alaska. The RAC was granted a monopoly over the fur trade and governance of the region, effectively making it a semi-autonomous colonial entity. The company established settlements, including Novoarkhangelsk, modern-day Sitka, and expanded its operations along the Alaskan coast and the Aleutian Islands. However, Russia's colonization of Alaska was marked by brutality and exploitation. The indigenous peoples of Alaska, including the Aleut, Tlingit, and Yupik, were subjected to forced labor, violence, and disease. The Russian fur traders often enslaved indigenous men to hunt sea otters, while women and children were taken as hostages to ensure compliance. The introduction of European diseases, such as smallpox, decimated indigenous populations, leading to a significant decline in their numbers. By the mid-19th century, Russia's hold on Alaska was weakening. The fur trade, which had been the primary economic driver, was in decline due to overhunting and the depletion of sea otter populations. The vast distances and harsh climate made it difficult for Russia to maintain its presence in the region. Additionally, Russia was facing financial difficulties and geopolitical challenges, including the Crimean War, 1853 to 1856, which strained its resources and exposed its vulnerabilities. The decision to sell Alaska, Russia's strategic retreat. Faced with these challenges, Russia began to consider selling Alaska. The Russian government, under Tsar Alexander II, saw the sale as a way to offload a distant and costly territory while also preventing it from falling into the hands of its rival, Great Britain. The British Empire, with its strong presence in Canada, posed a significant threat to Russian interests in North America. By selling Alaska to the United States, Russia hoped to create a buffer between British Canada and its own territories in Siberia. The idea of selling Alaska was not new. As early as the 1850s, Russian officials had discussed the possibility of ceding the territory to the United States. However, it was not until the 1860s that serious negotiations began. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, delayed the process, but once the war ended, talks resumed. Secretary of State William H. Seward, a staunch expansionist, was a strong advocate for the purchase of Alaska. Seward believed in the concept of manifest destiny, the idea that the United States was destined to expand across the North American continent. He saw Alaska as a strategic asset that would enhance American power in the Pacific and provide access to valuable resources. In March 1867, after months of negotiations, the United States and Russia agreed to the Treaty of Cession. the US agreed to pay $7.2 million for Alaska, amounting to about 2 cents per acre. The treaty was signed on March 30, 1867, and ratified by the US Senate on April 9, 1867. On October 18, 1867, the formal transfer of Alaska from Russia to the United States took place in a ceremony in Novo-Arhangelsk, which was renamed Sitka. The dark side of the purchase, indigenous displacement and exploitation. While the purchase of Alaska is often celebrated as a shrewd diplomatic move by the United States, it had devastating consequences for the indigenous peoples of the region. The transfer of sovereignty from Russia to the United States did little to improve the lives of Alaska's native inhabitants. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new era of exploitation and marginalization. Under American rule, the indigenous peoples of Alaska were subjected to policies of assimilation and dispossession. The US government sought to integrate Alaska into the national economy, primarily through the exploitation of its natural resources. This led to the displacement of indigenous communities from their traditional lands and the destruction of their way of life. The gold rushes of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly the Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 to 1899, brought an influx of settlers to Alaska. These settlers often encroached on indigenous lands, leading to conflicts and further displacement. The US government, eager to promote settlement and economic development, did little to protect the rights of indigenous peoples. The establishment of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, in 1971 was a belated attempt to address some of the injustices faced by Alaska's indigenous peoples. The act extinguished native land claims in exchange for monetary compensation and the creation of native-owned corporations. However, the ANCSA has been criticized for its failure to fully recognize indigenous sovereignty and for perpetuating a system of corporate control over native lands. Conclusion: a legacy of imperialism and exploitation. The purchase of Alaska from Russia in 1867 was a pivotal moment in the history of the United States, marking the nation's expansion into the Pacific and its emergence as a global power. However, this event cannot be understood without acknowledging the darker aspects of imperialism and colonialism that underpinned it. Russia's colonization of Alaska was characterized by violence, exploitation, and the subjugation of indigenous peoples. The sale of Alaska to the United States did not bring an end to these injustices. Rather, it transferred control of the region to another imperial power with its own agenda of expansion and resource extraction. For the indigenous peoples of Alaska, the purchase marked the beginning of a new chapter of dispossession and marginalization. The legacy of this history continues to shape the lives of Alaska's native communities today, as they struggle to assert their rights and preserve their cultures in the face of ongoing challenges. Please, like and subscribe. In reflecting on the purchase of Alaska, it is essential to recognize the human cost of imperialism and to confront the darker aspects of this history. Only by doing so can we begin to understand the full implications of this event and work towards a more just and equitable future for all.